January 1st brought a signal that every small business owner needs to understand. Nearly 20 states and more than 40 local jurisdictions just raised their minimum wage rates. But here's what most headlines miss. The direct wage increase is often just half the story. The real cost multiplier is hiding in something called wage compression. Today, we're mapping exactly what changed, where it changed, and most importantly, how smart operators are responding without sacrificing their margins or their best people. Here's a number that should get your attention. That ripple effect I mentioned? It can increase your actual labor cost impact by 20 to 50% beyond the headline wage increase. So if you budgeted for a 5% bump based on the new minimum, your real exposure might be 7 to 8% when you factor in everyone above that floor who expects a proportional raise. We'll show you exactly how to audit your exposure, phase your response, and turn this cost pressure into a competitive advantage. Let's look at the map. First, let's understand why minimum wage increases are no longer one-time events. Many states have now tied their rates to inflation indices, making annual increases the new normal. This structural shift means you can't treat each increase as a surprise to absorb. Smart operators are building these escalations into their 3-year planning cycles. The challenge isn't just paying minimum wage workers more. It's managing what happens to everyone else in your wage stack when that floor rises beneath them. Picture your best team lead, who worked hard to earn $15 an hour. When the new guy gets hired at $15 as a starting wage, that lead suddenly feels undervalued. That's wage compression in action, and it creates real business risk. Turnover among your trained, reliable workers who feel their experience is no longer recognized in their paycheck. Multi-state businesses face an additional layer of complexity. You might have one location in Missouri at $15, another in Washington at over $17. Each jurisdiction has different exemptions, different effective dates, and different rules about tip credits. Compliance alone has become a significant operational burden. Before we get into specific numbers, here's the good news from economic research. Minimum wage increases generally don't cause substantial increases in unemployment. Businesses adapt. They find efficiencies, adjust prices, and often discover that higher wages reduce the turnover costs that were quietly eating into their margins anyway. The political debate matters less than the practical reality. These increases are happening in most states. The question is how to adapt operationally, not whether to support the policy. Let's look at the highest rates first. Washington State now leads the nation at $17.13 per hour, the highest state minimum wage in the country. Connecticut follows closely at $16.94, with California right behind at $16.90. These West Coast and Northeast leaders set the tone. Hawaii raised its minimum to $16 per hour, one of the largest recent jumps in a state where small businesses already face elevated operating costs. Missouri made a significant move to $15 per hour. For businesses in Kansas City and St. Louis, this represents a meaningful shift in the labor cost environment. Maine increased to $15.10 per hour, and the response from small business owners there has been particularly vocal about the combined impact with new overtime thresholds. Minnesota took a different approach with inflation-adjusted increases. Their rate rose to $11.41 for all employers, one of the lower indexed rates but consistent and predictable. Here's a critical detail many miss. It's not just state rates. More than 40 local jurisdictions have their own higher minimums. Your city might require more than your state. Seattle, Denver, and San Francisco all maintain local rates well above their state floors. If you operate in these cities, the state rate is just your starting point. Now let's talk about the ripple effect more precisely. According to ADP's workforce analysis, that 20 to 50% multiplier on your actual labor cost impact is very real. When the minimum wage increases, employers often provide raises to employees already earning equal to or more than the new rate. ADP notes this affects morale and internal equity. Here's how to think about it. If 30% of your workforce earns minimum wage and you give them a 7% increase, your base calculation shows a 1% payroll bump. But if another 40% of your team earns within $3 of minimum and expects proportional raises, you might actually face a 5 to 4% total payroll increase. Interestingly, A pre-pandemic survey found that more than half of small business owners said minimum wage increases would have no impact on their businesses. That confidence may have been premature. The reality is that impact depends heavily on your industry, your wage structure, and your market's price sensitivity. Restaurants feel it differently than professional services firms. Labor-intensive businesses like retail, hospitality, and food service often see wages represent 25 to 35% of revenue. Even small percentage increases create measurable margin pressure. For service businesses where labor is your primary cost, the math is even more stark. A consulting firm or cleaning service might see 50% or more of revenue go to payroll. The federal minimum remains at $7.25, unchanged since 2009. But practically speaking, market wages have moved so far above that floor, it's largely symbolic. Even in states without their own minimum wage laws, competitive labor markets have pushed actual starting wages well above $7.25 in most industries. The market sets the real floor. Several states operate on automatic annual adjustments tied to the Consumer Price Index. This means planning for consistent, predictable increases rather than political surprises. Arizona, Colorado, Maine, and Washington all use cost of living adjustments. Montana, Ohio, and Vermont also index their minimum wages to inflation metrics. This indexing creates a planning advantage if you use it. You can reasonably project your wage cost trajectory 3 to 5 years out based on inflation forecasts. Tipped workers face a separate wage landscape. Many states allow tip credits that reduce the employer's direct wage obligation, but compliance requirements are strict. In states like California and Washington, tipped workers must receive the full state minimum before tips. Other states allow significant tip credit deductions from the base rate. The overtime threshold also rose in many states alongside minimum wage. This compounds the impact for businesses that rely on workers putting in extra hours. In Maine specifically, the NFIB noted small business owners expressing concern about the combined effect of wage and overtime threshold increases hitting their payroll simultaneously. Some industries face additional sector-specific wage rules. Healthcare aides, agricultural workers, and domestic employees often have separate minimum wage schedules. Quick service restaurants in California faced additional increases beyond the state minimum. If you're in food service there, your baseline is already significantly higher. Youth wages and training wages exist in some states with lower floors for workers under 20 or in their first 90 days. Check your state's specific provisions for these exemptions. Small business exemptions vary significantly by state. Some states set different minimums based on annual revenue or number of employees. Verify which tier applies to your operation. Let's move from the map to your action plan. Step 1. Audit your wage structure immediately. Identify every employee earning within $3 of the new minimum in your state. This audit reveals your true exposure. If you have 10 minimum wage workers and 15 workers within that $3 band, your ripple effect exposure just got 150% larger. Step 2. Don't absorb the full cost immediately. Consider phasing compression adjustments over 6 to 12 months, rather than implementing all raises on day one. Communicate this phased approach clearly to your team. Uncertainty about whether raises are coming creates more turnover risk than explaining a reasonable timeline for adjustments. Step 3. Review your scheduling efficiency. Sometimes the answer to higher wage costs isn't fewer workers, it's fewer total hours worked with better productivity during peak times. Run the numbers on 4 10-hour shifts versus 5 8-hour shifts. Look at where you're paying people to stand around versus when they're actually generating revenue. Step 4. Evaluate automation opportunities strategically. Online ordering systems, self-checkout options, and AI customer service tools can reduce minimum wage hour requirements. But be thoughtful here. Automation that removes your best customer touchpoints might save on wages while costing you loyalty. Not every human hour should be optimized away. Step 5. Price strategically. Research suggests small, more frequent price increases face less customer resistance than larger annual jumps. Consider 2 to 3% every 6 months. Frame price increases around value additions when possible. We've invested in our team resonates better than costs went up. Your customers often understand and appreciate quality service. Step 6. Turn this into a competitive advantage. If your competitors cut corners on staffing while you maintain quality, their customers may become yours. Higher wages often mean lower turnover, which reduces your training costs and maintains institutional knowledge. Run the full math, not just the payroll line item. Workers who feel fairly compensated provide better customer service, make fewer costly mistakes, and refer other quality candidates. These benefits don't show up on your wage expense line. Step 7. For multi-state operators, centralize your compliance tracking. Create a single document that shows rates, effective dates, and exemptions for every jurisdiction where you operate. Set calendar reminders for 60 days before each jurisdiction's typical adjustment date. This gives you planning time rather than scrambling after changes take effect. Consider payroll software that automatically updates for jurisdictional changes. The compliance time you save likely pays for the software cost within the first mistake avoided. Finally, connect with other small business owners in your area. They're navigating the same pressures, and shared strategies often emerge from these conversations. Here's the bigger picture perspective. Minimum wage increases are a permanent feature of the operating environment, not a temporary headwind. The businesses that thrive won't be those hoping for policy reversal. They'll be the ones who build wage growth assumptions into their fundamental business models. This might mean different pricing strategies, different service models, or different value propositions. But pretending it's not happening isn't a strategy. The signal here isn't labor is getting too expensive. Its labor cost is rising predictably, and that predictability is actually an advantage for operators who use it. To recap, audit your wage structure now. Identify everyone within $3 of the new minimum. Phase your adjustments. Communicate clearly, and price strategically. The operators who respond thoughtfully to these changes will maintain their margins while keeping their best people. Those who react in panic often do neither. That's this week's signal. The minimum wage map changed on January 1st. Your response to it determines whether that change becomes a cost or an opportunity. Remember, this content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Always consult with a qualified advisor before making significant financial decisions. Until next time, stay signal-focused.